Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. A friend of mine recently told me to avoid making my first paper speech on a controversial motion. So it is a relief to start with something as uncontroversial as this. I was also warned my employment options might be limited if I went too hard on Israel. So I'm very sad to say that Netanyahu's press office will sadly be denying my application. I would like to begin by thanking the President once more for giving me the opportunity to make my first paper speech. And what a motion to begin with. Few propositions could be quite so straightforward. This House believes that Israel is a greater threat to regional stability than Iran. And really, what a gift of a motion that is. Israel makes the case for us quite effortlessly. Violation after violation of ceasefires, repeated invasions and occupations, broken promises, and acts of aggression dressed up as defense. There has rarely been an easier case to argue in this chamber. The dominant argument in international relations discourse, peddled for the last couple of decades in the United States and the Western world, is that Iran is the principal threat and source of instability in the Middle East. But it is essential to look deeper and ask which state has launched more destructive wars, attacked more of its neighbors, and killed more civilians. The uncomfortable answer is, of course, Israel. Never again will I be presented the chance to argue for or against a nation that proves my point for me, offering a wealth of historical and recent examples. Imagine this, as Israel did 2 months ago, striking Hamas peace negotiations in a US-allied state while it was hosting ceasefire talks to end your own war. It sounds surreal, but that is the nature of Israel. And looking to the past does not paint a much rosier picture. From killing British diplomats in the bombing of the King David Hotel in Jerusalem to providing military aid to anti-Assad rebels as recently as 2018, Israel has consistently posed an existential threat to stability in the Middle East. Even those countries with leaders with what President Trump gently refers to as rough pasts, for instance, South Africa and Syria, have seen their figures moderate once in power. Trump recently joked about Ahmed al-Shara, Syria's current interim president, who once had a $10 million US bounty on his head for being a terrorist. But Israel's own leaders, whose early years were defined by terrorism against colonial powers, sabotage and espionage, never left those tendencies behind. The terror tactics of their pre-power years continued, and in some cases even intensified during their time in office. Look to the Sabra and Shatila massacre enabled by Israeli forces, if you want proof of what those so-called rough pasts produce in power. Now, the opposition will insist that Iran's nuclear program is the great destabilizing force in the Middle East, as Katie has already enlightened us. But they will fail to tell you how Israel got its own nuclear weapons. Israel obtained them entirely without international approval, and at least initially, against the wishes of its own sponsor, the United States. France helped build the Dimona reactor under the convenient label of a textile factory. American source materials featured in long-running allegations, and the Nuremberg affair left open suspicions about diverted US uranium. All of this was done under a shroud of deep secrecy, with Israel partnering with South Africa. With its own alleged apartheid policies that treat Arab citizens as second-rate, it is no wonder that the two found so much in common. After Kennedy, who had the audacity to push for inspections of Dimona, was assassinated, US policy shifted, and later presidents quietly acquiesced. The result? Israel's undeclared nuclear arsenal tied America to endless entanglements, reinforced Arab fears of a nuclear-armed outlier, and helped drive other states, including Iran, to seek their own deterrent. At almost no point in its history has Israel acted in very good faith when it comes to peace. Consider the Lebanon example. In the 2006 war, Israel dropped up to 4 million cluster submunitions in the final 72 hours alone, and that was 90% of its total use. This was after the UN resolution had already passed. Or take Gaza. Even after the ceasefire was agreed, the IDF, apparently curious how deep its stockpiles ran, dropped a few delayed gifts before the truce fully took hold. You might like to think that these are unfortunate one-offs. They are not. Israel has a habit of killing ceasefires almost the moment they are thought up. In the month or so since the latest ceasefire, Israeli attacks have killed at least 242 Palestinians and injured more than 600. And the pattern is brutally predictable. On the 19th of October 2025, Israel shattered the US-brokered Gaza truce with a wave of strikes that killed 26 civilians across camps and homes, including children. 2 days later, the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, jetted in for a friendly visit, while Washington pressed ahead with over $10 billion in arms notifications this year alone. During the fragile 2025 January ceasefire, Israel committed over 1,000 breaches, including airstrikes on civilian areas, grounded incursions along the Yellow Line, and a total aid blockade that choked off food, fuel, and medicine. It then refused Phase 2, kept the blockade, and killed hundreds of Palestinians, including 270 women and children. And what followed? A $4 billion emergency aid package, which included expedited US deliveries, faster weapon shipments, and Iron Dome upgrades, as Washington vetoed not one, not two, but 3 UN resolutions calling for restraint amid the chaos. Israel is uniquely susceptible to breaking ceasefires because conflict keeps the weapons flowing. It ensures the money, the visibility, and the illusion of existential siege that underwrites its foreign policy. Without conflict, Israel has no leverage over its allies. Stability, to put it simply, threatens Israel's ambitions. And what of Israel's relationships? Israel is a bad friend. It stress tests its alliances to breaking point, brushing off US cautions and humiliating its partners in public. Iran, for all of its flaws, at least maintains a few enduring friendships. Israel is a broken record player whose only party trick is bombing its neighbors and betraying its allies. For years, under the ironically named Operation Good Neighbor, Israel funneled aid, cash, and weapons to anti-Assad rebels, including groups affiliated with the Al-Nusra Front, Al-Qaeda's Syrian branch. Wounded fighters were treated in Israeli hospitals, and logistical support kept rebel units fighting. In other words, Israel was adding fuel to the fire of instability by backing groups that the US and others designate as terrorists. Despite Iran's authoritarianism and nuclear ambitions, it has simply failed to compete with the destabilizer-in-chief of the Near East. Israel is constantly ahead of the curve with innovative new ways to ensure peace never takes root. The fact of the matter is that Israel's policies do not invite peace. It receives less aid when tensions de-escalate, and Israel's foreign policy depends on conflict, militarily, politically, and economically. It has to rely on illusion or perhaps the genuine fear that every other state in the region is out to get it. As offensive realism would predict, Israel pursues maximal power and regional hegemony under acute insecurity. Because of its constant siege mentality, Israel must project power simply to exist, so domination becomes the norm. It takes the power-seeking playbook to an extreme, burning through regional alliances whenever they get in the way, and failing to maintain any durable relationships in the neighborhood. There was a time when the US and the world viewed Iran as the regional problem. But that has largely shifted since 1979, because what has superseded the dangerous US-backed Israel is the US-backed, my apologies, I've read this completely wrong. What superseded the US-backed Iran was the US-backed Israel, which has had much more power to produce instability in the region. No state propped up by a superpower, whether American or Soviet or anything else, has had the ability to bring lasting stability to the Middle East. And despite its Islamic revolution, Iran has failed to become the principal source of destabilization. It comes close in 2025, but this is only after decades of Israeli and American behavior made it almost impossible not to react. From its very inception, the State of Israel has not brought stability. It serves a narrow set of interests. Perhaps Herzl could only imagine a homeland, but what has sadly emerged is a garrison state. Israel's relations with its neighbors are only ever episodically calm, rarely peaceable, and never sustained. Before its creation, there was at least some possibility of peaceful interfaith life across the Levant, and afterwards we have seen only wars and occupation. Iran, despite its proxy networks and nuclear ambitions, only requires, at most, regime change, and perhaps not even that for stable relations with the rest of the Middle East. Israel, on the other hand, shares terrible relations with the majority of its neighbors. The Sunni-Shia issue pales in comparison to the issues that Israel has created for itself. To reiterate my central argument, Israel's policies feed on instability. Israel acts against ceasefires, undermines peace initiatives, and manipulates its allies while arming its enemies and sustaining a permanent war economy that thrives on chaos. Where Iran antagonizes, Israel annihilates. And where Iran postures, Israel bombs. And where stability threatens to break through, Israel ensures it dies first. Mr. President, honorable members of this House, the truth is undeniable. Behind its endless talk of security and survival, Israel has abandoned any real pursuit of peace. It stands today as the region's chief destabilizer. And that is why this House must see that it is Israel, not Iran, that poses the greatest threat to Middle Eastern stability. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your speech. I now look to Mr. Hillel Neuer to continue the case for side opposition.
Mr. President, I confess I hesitated before agreeing to debate this evening because doing so risks dignifying a proposition so disconnected from basic facts that it verges on the satirical, that Israel, of all states, poses a greater threat to regional stability than the Islamic Republic of Iran. But we now live in an age where people will believe almost anything. Nearly 1 in 4 people in this country, aged 18 to 34, believe that the 7/7 terrorist attacks were, quote, probably a hoax. And here in this Oxford Union, we saw that just 3 weeks ago, no less than 501 members believed it was right to vote in support of the incoming president after he had publicly celebrated the killing of Charlie Kirk. And so I decided to attend and to lay out a few essential facts proving that tonight's proposition is not merely wrong, but the inversion of reality. Regional stability is measured by who starts wars, not by who stops them. Israel does not arm terror proxies. In 5 Arab countries, the Islamic regime in Iran does that. And the entire Middle East knows this, and that is why Arab states quietly depend on Israel for their own survival. Fact number 1, the moderate Sunni Arab states are part of a strategic alliance with Israel beginning 4 decades ago. Egypt signed a peace treaty with Israel in 1979. Jordan did so in 1994. The historic Abraham Accords in 2020 brought together the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan, signing peace and normalization agreements with Israel. The accords recognize that the Arab and Jewish peoples are descendants of a common ancestor, Abraham, that both peoples are indigenous to the region, and they articulate a vision of advancing a culture of peace, security, and prosperity. No, I am interrupted all the time at the United Nations by the worst regimes. In Oxford, I shall speak uninterrupted. Fact number 2, Saudi Arabia, custodian of the 2 holy mosques, has also developed a significant rapprochement with Israel. Indeed, in the minutes that they captured of the Hamas leadership meetings that were held days before their decision to invade Israel and launch the war and massacre of October 7th, 2023, in the minutes of Hamas, it was written, quote, "There is no doubt that the Saudi Zionist normalization agreement is progressing significantly. And so Hamas decided on, quote, an extraordinary action to try and torpedo it." Fact, the regional alliance between Israel and the moderate Arab countries was resilient enough to survive the war of the past 2 years. Last year, neighboring Egypt and Jordan imported a record amount of natural gas from Israel. Israel provides parched Jordan with 100 million cubic meters of water every year. How is Israel a threat to regional stability? The truth is the opposite. One of the most powerful illustrations of this regional alliance came last year on April 13th, 2024, when the Islamic regime in Iran launched an unprecedented attack on the people of Israel with 170 drones, 30 cruise missiles, and more than 120 ballistic missiles. No. Those who helped shoot down the incoming weapons included the air forces, not only of the US, the UK, and France, but Jordan, while Gulf states such as Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates contributed intelligence, including radar tracking information. Now, this wasn't a one-off. When Iran attacked Israel again in June 2025, Jordan shot down Iranian missiles and drones crossing overhead. Saudi Arabia, according to reports, allowed Israel its airspace to do so as well. Now, the fact that Sunni Arab states provided a combination of Air Force interceptions, radar, and intelligence is a real-world vote on tonight's motion. They know, the Arab states know, that for their people, Israel is a partner in survival, and the Islamic regime in Iran is an existential threat. You don't intercept missiles heading toward a threat to regional stability. You intercept missiles from one. So let us address the real driver of instability, the Islamic regime in Iran, because revolutionary jihad is their raison d'etre. Let us compare Israel, at the very moment of its birth, on May 14th, 1948, in its Declaration of Independence, reached out to its neighbors with a simple message, quote, "We extend our hand to all neighboring states and their peoples in an offer of peace." In Iran, with the Islamic regime, it was the exact opposite. 1 year after the anniversary of the Ayatollah Revolution, the Ayatollah declared on February 11th, 1980, quote, "We shall export our revolution to the whole world. Until the cry, 'There is no God but Allah,' resounds over the whole world, there will be struggle." And that is what they do. In the region and beyond, Iran, through its Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, exports terrorism and war. And wherever they go in the region, they bring ruin to societies. Let's look at Yemen. The Iranian regime destabilizes Yemen. They armed and trained the Houthis, a group whose slogan is "Death to America, death to Israel, damn the Jews." That is what they cry out every single day, and Iran is their sponsor. The Houthis destroyed Yemen. They collapsed state institutions, crippled hospitals and basic services, diverted aid, deepening famine and economic freefall. Their own people are starving, hundreds of thousands, yet unprovoked, from 1,000 miles away, with the very few resources the country has, the Houthis spend them to launch over 400 missile and drone attacks at Israeli cities. All of it sponsored by Iran. This is regional stability. Now let's look at Lebanon. Iran's proxy Hezbollah hollowed out every institution in the country, turning Lebanon into a failed state. They built an Iranian-funded parallel military stronger than the Lebanese army. They seized control of border crossings and ports, converted entire regions into fortified enclaves beyond the reach of the state. Iran's Hezbollah assassinated critics, toppled Lebanese governments that tried to assert sovereignty, dragged Lebanon into wars that its people never chose. Hezbollah's capture of the economy, fuel smuggling, customs evasion, protection rackets, bled the treasury dry and helped trigger Lebanon's financial collapse. And by launching attacks on Israel from civilian neighborhoods, Hezbollah, backed by Iran, ensured that Lebanon would live permanently on the brink of war, scaring off investment, tourism, and any hope of recovery. In short, Hezbollah replaced the Lebanese state with an Iranian proxy empire, and the result was national ruin. Let's look at Syria. When Syrians protested peacefully to rise up against Assad regime in 2011, the regime was on the brink of collapse, but the Iranian regime suddenly intervened to save its client. They deployed IRGC commanders, imported thousands of Shiite militia from Iraq, Afghanistan, and Lebanon, overseeing sectarian cleansing in key corridors connecting Damascus to the coast. Tehran funded and directed a campaign of mass atrocities. You can see the mass graves that have been revealed on TV in Syria. From starvation sieges to chemical weapons attacks, killing hundreds of thousands of people. 500,000 people are estimated to have been killed by the Syrian regime promoted by Iran. They also displaced millions, meaning half the population. Iran entrenched militias across Syria, built missile factories on their soil, used the country as a forward base to attack Israel, and threatened Jordan. Iran did not stabilize Syria, it shattered it. And the moment that Hezbollah, Iran's proxy, fell, the people rose up to challenge them. Now, Iran has done the same to Iraq. They destroyed Iraq. They did the same to Gaza. They transformed Hamas. No. They transformed Hamas into a mini army. Tehran funded rockets, tunnels, drone programs, while Hamas diverted aid from civilians to weapons. Instead of building a future for Palestinians, Hamas, with Iranian training, built an underground fortress beneath homes, hospitals, and schools. The result was October 7th. No. The deadliest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. Gaza, you know, is a beautiful beachfront property. It could have been prosperous. If you've never been there, I've been there. The sand, the beaches of Gaza are beautiful and can be a beautiful property. But Iran, with Hamas, made it a military outpost for its war on Israel, condemning Palestinians to endless conflict. Now.
Please, no. Please, can the House come to order? We're here to have a civil debate. Please do not heckle. Please, continue the case.
Let us finally look beyond the region. Iran hires hitmen to assassinate dissidents around the globe. Just a few days ago, I was with my friend Masih Alinejad, the great Iranian women's rights activist who prompted the Women Life Freedom movement. They tried to kill her. She lives in New York now, exiled dissident. They tried to kill her 3 times, sent hitmen to her house in Brooklyn. I was at the trial in March. 3 teams came to try and kidnap her and kill her. They've sent dissidents here in the UK they sent hitmen to try and kill the journalist Pouria Zarati. Now, the dissidents have been attacked across Europe, and I would be remiss not to mention that a Oxford human rights lawyer here, the founding head of the Oxford Public Interest Program here at Oxford, Kaveh Mousavi, has brought a legal claim, reported in The Guardian, January 30th, 2023, brought to the UK police with another human rights lawyer, asserting that Mr. Mohammad of Iran, who was a senior regime official for 20 years, including between 1988 and 1997, during a period, I quote from The Guardian, during a period when hundreds of assassinations of dissidents in Europe were attempted and committed on the orders of the Iranian regime, and he was a senior regime official, the human rights lawyers from Oxford also claim that in Mr. Mohammadi's 1989 book, A Critique of the Satanic Versus Conspiracy, where he endorses and justifies the fatwa issued by Ayatollah Khomeini in 1989 against the famed novelist Salman Rushdie, who was stabbed 15 times in 2022 as a result, presumably, of this fatwa. And in the book, Mr. Mohammadi writes in his book that Rushdie is, quote, an absolute apostate, and the punishment of an apostate is execution. And so, Mr. Mohammadi, tonight, you say you stand for regional stability, but you have once blessed the idea that an author, a citizen of this country, should be killed for writing a book. So please tell this House, do you still believe that writers deserve death, or will you finally retract and renounce your support for that fatwa? Mr. President, Iran not only sends hitmen around the world to assassinate dissidents and journalists, but they beat, blind, torture, and kill women who protest. In Israel, it's a national pastime to lambaste the government. In Tel Aviv on Saturday evening, protests have often drawn tens of thousands and even hundreds of thousands of demonstrators. In Iran, during the Women Life Freedom protests in 2022, the regime arrested 20,000 people across 130 cities. At least 551 Iranians, including dozens of children, were killed for protesting. Is this stability? To conclude, in the final analysis, Mr. President, the greatest threat to regional stability is a regime that murders its own people, hunts its critics across Europe and America, arms terror proxies, and exports terrorism on 4 continents. The Islamic regime in Iran has killed hundreds of thousands in Syria, shattered Yemen through the Houthis, bankrupted Lebanon through Hezbollah, hijacked Iraq through militias, and turned Gaza into a launching pad for the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. At home, it shoots women in the streets, blinds teenagers, tortures dissidents, and executes protesters. It sends assassins to murder innocent people in Brooklyn, London, Buenos Aires. This is not a government seeking stability. It is a revolutionary engine of hate, terror, and chaos. Israel, by contrast, is the firewall that Arab regimes understand prevents Iran's imperial project from engulfing the region. To claim Israel is the greater threat to stability is not merely wrong, but it is an inversion of reality itself. I urge you to vote for the opposition. Thank you.
I urge everyone, we are here to debate ideas, not attack each other personally. Please, let's focus